Marcus Chun had always believed that first contact would happen on Earth's terms. The diplomatic protocols, the careful introductions, the measured exchange of knowledge between civilizations. He never imagined it would begin with him floating unconscious in the wreckage of his exploration vessel, 3,000 light-years from home, surrounded by beings who looked like they had stepped out of a fantasy novel. The salvage operation that found him was led by the Ethereal Consortium, a coalition of species that had dominated this region of space for over 2 millennia. Their ships were works of art as much as they were vessels of war, crafted from materials that seemed to bend light itself. The crew that pulled Marcus from the debris of the UES Endeavor was primarily Velithran, tall and graceful beings with pale blue skin and silver hair that moved as if underwater. Captain Lyrian Starweaver was the first face Marcus saw when he regained consciousness in the medical bay. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, her violet eyes studying him with a mixture of curiosity and something else he couldn't quite identify. Her medical team had done remarkable work, healing injuries that should have killed him, though they seemed puzzled by his alien physiology. "You are awake," she said in perfect, if slightly accented, English. The translation matrix had taken time to decipher his language from the ship's computer, but Velithran technology was sophisticated enough to manage it. "I'm Captain Starweaver. You have been unconscious for 3 cycles. Marcus tried to sit up, wincing at the lingering pain in his ribs. "My ship, gone. We found you in an escape pod that was failing. Another few hours, and you would have been dead." Her voice carried no emotion, but her eyes seemed to soften slightly. "What is your species called?" "Human. From Earth." He looked around the medical bay, noting the organic curves of the walls, the way everything seemed to grow rather than be built. "Thank you for saving me." Captain Starweaver nodded once. "We are bound by salvage law and common decency. However, your presence here creates complications. This region is under the protection of the Consortium, and your species is unknown to us. There are protocols." Over the next several days, as Marcus recovered, he learned about the complex political situation he had stumbled into. The Ethereal Consortium controlled dozens of star systems, but they were not the only power in this region. The hegemony of suns, a militaristic empire of reptilian drachmary, had been expanding their territory for centuries. Border skirmishes were common, and tensions had been rising. The Consortium operated under a strict caste system, with the nobility holding absolute power over trade, diplomacy, and military actions. Captain Starweaver, Marcus learned, was not just a ship's captain, but a member of the high nobility, third in line to the throne of the Velithran home system. "Your technology is crude by our standards," she explained as they walked through the ship's observation deck. "But there are aspects that are intriguing. Your propulsion system, for instance. It uses principles we abandoned centuries ago, yet you have refined them in ways that are quite elegant." Marcus had been sharing technical information freely, partly out of gratitude, and partly because he was genuinely fascinated by Velithran science. Their ships used exotic matter manipulation to fold space, while humans still relied on fusion torches and gravity assists. Yet his ship's computer systems, built on quantum processing principles, were more advanced than anything the Consortium had developed. "We specialize in information processing," he explained. "My ship's AI could calculate jump solutions faster than your navigation computers, even though your drives are far superior." An interesting complement of capabilities. Captain Starweaver's expression was thoughtful. "Tell me, Marcus Chin of Earth, what brought you so far from home?" The question was simple, but the answer was complex. Marcus had been part of humanity's first deep space exploration mission, launched when long-range sensors had detected signs of advanced civilizations in this region. But the mission had been more than scientific curiosity. Earth was dying, slowly poisoned by centuries of industrial excess and climate change. Humanity needed new worlds, new resources, new hope. "We're explorers," he said, which was true enough. "My people have always looked to the stars." What he didn't mention was the desperate edge to humanity's expansion, the way Earth's government had poured resources into the exploration program, while billions struggled with rising seas and failing crops. He had volunteered for a one-way mission because going home might mean returning to a dead world. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from a bridge. Captain Starweaver's expression grew grave as she listened to the report. "We are approaching the border zone. There has been another incident. The hegemony had attacked a Consortium trade convoy, destroying 3 ships capturing their crews. It was the latest in a series of escalating provocations, and the consortium's response would likely determine whether the Cold War turned hot. "I must attend to my duties," Captain Starweaver said. "You're welcome to observe from the bridge if you wish. Your perspective might be valuable." The bridge of the Velethran vessel was a marvel of organic architecture, with control surfaces that seemed to grow from the walls and displays that projected directly into the air. The crew moved with fluid grace, their long fingers dancing over interfaces that responded to touch and thought. Marcus watched as Captain Starweaver took report from across the consortium fleet. 6 heavy cruisers and twice as many smaller vessels were converging on the border zone, where hegemony forces had established a temporary base on a contested asteroid. The situation was tense, with both sides positioning for a confrontation that could spiral into full war. The hegemony claims the asteroid contains rare elements vital to their expansion, the tactical officer reported. They are demanding we recognize their salvage rights. The asteroid was clearly within our territory when they seized it, another officer countered. This is naked aggression. Captain Starweaver studied the tactical displays, her violet eyes reflecting the light from the holographic projections. "Commander Vex, what is the status of their defensive grid?" "Formidable. They have established shield generators and particle weapon emplacements. A direct assault would be costly." Marcus found himself studying the tactical situation with professional interest. The hegemony position was well chosen, with natural cover from the asteroid's bulk and clear fields of fire in all directions. But there were weaknesses. "Captain," he said quietly, "may I make an observation?" She turned to him with surprise. It was presumptuous for an alien civilian to comment on military matters, but something in his tone made her nod. "Their defensive grid assumes you'll attack from the most logical vectors," Marcus continued. "But asteroids aren't solid. If you could map the internal structure, you might find tunnels or caverns that would allow a small force to approach undetected." The tactical officer's expression was skeptical. "Our sensors cannot penetrate their shielding to map the interior." "But mine could." Marcus gestured toward the salvage bay where his escape pod was stored. "Human quantum sensors work on different principles. They might be able to see what yours cannot." The suggestion sparked an intense debate among the senior officers. Using alien technology in a military operation was unprecedented, and there were concerns about security and protocol. But Captain Starweaver's expression was thoughtful. "The approach has merit," she said finally. "Commander Vex, prepare a detailed scan of the asteroid using our standard sensors. Marcus Chun, you will assist with deploying your quantum sensors. This information will inform our tactical planning." The next several hours were a blur of technical work as Marcus helped adapt his escape pod sensor array to work with the Velethran systems. The quantum sensors were indeed able to penetrate the hegemony's shielding, revealing a complex network of tunnels and chambers within the asteroid. The intelligence transformed the tactical situation. Captain Starweaver ordered a small strike team to infiltrate the asteroid through an abandoned mining shaft, while the main fleet engaged the hegemony forces in a diversionary attack. The operation was risky, but it offered the best chance of ending the standoff without massive casualties. Marcus watched from the bridge as the plan unfolded. The diversionary attack drew the hegemony's attention, while the strike team slipped through the asteroid's interior. Within hours, they had disabled the shield generators and captured the command center. The hegemony forces, suddenly exposed and outnumbered, agreed to withdraw. The crisis was over, at least temporarily. "Your assistance was invaluable," Captain Starweaver told him as the fleet regrouped. "The consortium owes you a debt." But Marcus could see the larger picture. The hegemony would not give up easily, and the consortium's resources were stretched thin. More conflicts were coming, and they would need every advantage they could find. "Captain," he said, "I think we need to have a longer conversation about mutual cooperation." That conversation would change everything, though neither of them knew it yet. As the fleet set course for the consortium's capital world, Marcus found himself thinking about the irony of his situation. He had come looking for hope for humanity, and instead found himself becoming a bridge between civilizations on the brink of war. The journey to the capital would take several days, and Marcus used the time to learn everything he could about consortium politics and culture. The more he learned, the more complex the situation became. The consortium was not a monolithic empire, but a delicate alliance of dozens of species, held together by treaties, trade agreements, and shared fear of the hegemony. The Valathrans were the dominant species, but they ruled through consensus rather than force. The nobility made decisions through a complex court system that balanced competing interests and ancient protocols. Captain Starweaver, despite her military rank and noble birth, would need to navigate careful political waters to get approval for any formal alliance with humanity. The High Court will be skeptical, she explained as they reviewed star charts in her private quarters. Unknown species have allied with the hegemony before. Some will see your arrival as potentially suspicious. What would convince them otherwise? Proof of your commitment to the consortium's values. Demonstration of the benefits such an alliance could bring. She paused, seeming to wrestle with something. There are also personal guarantees that carry weight in our society. Marcus was beginning to understand that Valithran society placed enormous importance on personal bonds and family connections. Marriage alliances between noble houses had shaped their politics for centuries. How much weight? He asked. Captain Starweaver's violet eyes met his, and he saw something there that made his breath catch. Enough to change everything. The conversation was interrupted by another urgent communication. Long-range sensors had detected a massive hegemony fleet massing near the border zone. The crisis they had just resolved was apparently only the beginning of something much larger. As Marcus watched Captain Starweaver coordinate the consortium's response, he realized that his arrival had not just complicated the political situation. It had arrived at a crucial moment when the decisions made in the next few days could determine the fate of entire civilizations. The capital world was still days away, but events were already in motion that would test everything the consortium stood for. And somehow, Marcus found himself at the center of it all, an alien stranger who might hold the key to survival for billions of beings he had never met. The irony was not lost on him. He had left a dying Earth to find hope among the stars, and instead found himself helping to prevent a war that could destroy the very civilizations he had hoped to join. But as he caught Captain Starweaver watching him with those thoughtful violet eyes, Marcus began to wonder if he had found something else among the stars. Something he had never expected to find so far from home. The capital world of the ethereal consortium was called Luminous, and it lived up to its name. As Captain Starweaver's vessel emerged from fold space, Marcus pressed his face to the observation deck's crystalline window and stared in wonder at a world that seemed to glow from within. The planet's surface was covered in structures that defied human understanding of architecture. Spires of living crystal stretched kilometers into the sky, their surfaces rippling with patterns of light that pulsed in rhythm with some planetary heartbeat. Vast gardens spiraled around these towers, creating hanging ecosystems that were visible even from orbit. Luminous has been the consortium's capital for over 1,000 years, Captain Starweaver explained, joining him at the observation window. The planet itself is semi-sentient, a symbiotic organism that works in partnership with its inhabitants. Marcus watched as ships moved through the atmosphere with no visible means of propulsion, riding currents of energy that the planet itself generated. It's beautiful and completely impossible by human physics. Your species will learn, she said with what might have been amusement. The universe contains more possibilities than any single civilization can imagine. The ship descended toward a landing platform that grew from the surface like a flower opening to receive them. As they touched down, Marcus felt a subtle vibration through the deck plates, as if the planet were welcoming them home. Before we disembark, Captain Starweaver said, her tone becoming more formal, there are protocols you must understand. The High Court operates under ancient traditions. As an unknown species, you will be considered a potential threat until proven otherwise. I will present you as my guest and speak for your character, but ultimately you must convince them yourself. Marcus nodded, checking his appearance one last time. He wore a formal uniform that Captain Starweaver's staff had created for him, styled to show respect for consortium traditions while maintaining his human identity. The result was elegant, but clearly alien, which was probably the point. The approach to the High Court took them through the heart of Luminise's capital city. Marcus had expected something like a human metropolis, but this was something entirely different. The buildings breathed. Streets curved and flowed like rivers. Gardens floated in the air, their roots drawing sustenance from atmospheric moisture. Citizens of a dozen species moved through this organic landscape with fluid grace. Tall Valathrans walked beside crystalline Shamari, whose bodies reflected light in prismatic cascades. Gaseous ethereals drifted in containment suits that looked more like jewelry than technology. Four-armed Kalani merchants negotiated deals with musical beings whose words created visible patterns in the air. The consortium is humanity's future, Marcus murmured, watching a group of Elethran children play with constructs of pure light. Perhaps, Captain Starweaver replied, if we survive the present. The High Court building was the largest structure Marcus had ever seen, a spiraling tower that seemed to stretch beyond the atmosphere. Its surface was covered in moving murals that told the history of the consortium, from its founding to its greatest victories and deepest tragedies. Inside, the corridors were vast enough to accommodate the largest species of the consortium. Gravity varied from section to section, allowing beings adapted to different environments to meet comfortably. The technology was so advanced it seemed like magic, until Marcus reminded himself that human quantum computers would seem equally magical to a medieval peasant. The audience chamber of the High Court was designed to inspire awe, and it succeeded. The ceiling opened directly to space, held back by energy fields that allowed the light of distant stars to illuminate the proceedings. Hundreds of seats were arranged in concentric circles around a central platform, with each section designed for different atmospheric requirements. As Marcus and Captain Starweaver entered, conversations died. All attention focused on the strange alien walking beside one of the highest nobles of the realm. Marcus could feel the weight of dozens of different types of eyes studying him, analyzing him, judging him. The current session was already in progress, dealing with reports from across the consortium. Marcus listened to debates about trade routes, territorial disputes, and resource allocation. The complexity was staggering. The consortium governed thousands of worlds with billions of inhabitants, each with their own needs and desires. Then, the topic turned to the hegemony threat, and the mood in the chamber darkened. The latest intelligence indicates a massive military buildup, reported Admiral Kess, a Kalani whose four arms gestured emphatically as she spoke. They have deployed at least 3 full battle fleets to the border zone. This is not another probe or raiding action. This is preparation for war. Murmurs of concern rippled through the assembly. The hegemony had been a threat for centuries, but they had never before shown such aggressive preparation for large-scale conflict. What triggered this escalation? Asked Chancellor Vorth, the aged Shamari who served as the consortium's senior diplomat. Unknown, Admiral Kess replied. But the timing suggests they may have intelligence about something that makes them believe they have an advantage. Marcus felt Captain Starweaver tense beside him. The timing of his arrival and the hegemony's military buildup might not be coincidental. If the hegemony had detected his ship's arrival, they might see it as evidence that the consortium had gained a new ally. The debate continued for another hour, with representatives from various systems reporting on their defensive preparations. The picture that emerged was sobering. The consortium had superior technology and defensive positions, but the hegemony had numbers and the advantage of being the aggressor. Finally, Chancellor Vorth called for new business, and Captain Starweaver stood. Honored Chancellor, esteemed members of the court, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. I present to the court a matter of great importance. During our recent patrol of the border zone, we encountered a representative of a previously unknown species. I present Marcus Chon of Earth, whose people call themselves humans. Marcus stood as hundreds of eyes focused on him again. He had rehearsed this moment, but actually standing before the most powerful beings in known space was still intimidating. Speak, Marcus Chon of Earth, Chancellor Vorth commanded, his crystalline voice echoing through the chamber. What brings your people to our region of space? Marcus took a deep breath and began the speech he had prepared. He spoke of Earth, of humanity's long journey to the stars, of their search for knowledge and friendship among the cosmos. He was careful to avoid mentioning Earth's environmental crisis or humanity's desperate need for resources. This first impression needed to show strength, not weakness. We come seeking understanding, he concluded. Our species has much to learn from the wisdom of the consortium, and perhaps something to offer in return. The questions came immediately. Representatives wanted to know about human technology, military capabilities, population size, territorial claims. Marcus answered as honestly as he could, while being careful not to reveal information that could be used against humanity. Then came the harder questions. Counselor Rex, a Drachmary who had defected from the hegemony decades ago, leaned forward with obvious suspicion. "How do we know this is not a hegemony deception?" he hissed. "A spy sent to infiltrate our defenses?" "The technology doesn't match," Admiral Kess interjected. "We've analyzed the ship's remains. The principles are entirely different from hegemony science." "Technology can be faked," Counselor Rex countered. "What proof do we have of his true allegiance?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus felt the mood of the chamber shifting as doubt crept in. These beings had survived centuries of conflict through careful suspicion of outsiders. Captain Starweaver stood again, her movements graceful but determined. "Honor Chancellor, I offer proof of Marcus Chen's character and allegiance." "What proof do you propose, Captain?" Chancellor Vorth asked. Marcus felt his heart stop as Captain Starweaver turned to look directly at him, her violet eyes bright with determination and something else he couldn't quite identify. "I propose to marry him." The chamber erupted. Representatives shouted in a dozen languages, their words creating a cacophony of surprise, outrage, and confusion. Marcus stared at Captain Starweaver in shock, unable to process what she had just said. "Silence!" Chancellor Vorth's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The chamber fell quiet, but Marcus could feel the tension crackling in the air like electricity. "Captain Starweaver," the Chancellor continued once order was restored, "are you formally proposing a marriage bond with this alien being?" "I am," she replied, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was suggesting. "Under the ancient laws, a marriage bond creates obligations of loyalty and mutual defense that supersede all other considerations. If Marcus Chun were a hegemony agent, he could not accept such a bond without exposing his deception." The logic was brilliant and completely insane. Marcus understood enough about Velithran culture to know that marriage bonds were not taken lightly. They were sacred contracts that carried enormous legal and social weight. "The proposal has merit," admitted Counselor Thane, an elderly Velithran whose family controlled several star systems. "Marriage bonds have been used to seal alliances for centuries." "But with an alien?" protested Counselor Rex. "This is unprecedented." "So is our current situation," Captain Starweaver replied calmly. "Unprecedented times call for unprecedented solutions." Chancellor Vorth studied both Marcus and Captain Starweaver with eyes that seemed to see through matter itself. "Marcus Chun of Earth, do you understand what is being proposed?" Marcus felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff. Accepting would bind him to the consortium in ways he couldn't fully comprehend. Refusing would likely end any chance of an alliance between humanity and these advanced civilizations. But there was more to consider than politics. Over the past weeks, he had come to admire Captain Starweaver enormously. Her intelligence, her courage, her dedication to her people. If he were honest with himself, his feelings had already moved beyond simple admiration. "I understand," he said finally, "and I accept." The chamber erupted again, but this time Captain Starweaver was smiling. The expression transformed her face, making her appear younger and somehow more radiant. "Then, let the bond be witnessed," Chancellor Vorth declared. "But know this, Marcus Chun of Earth. If this is deception, if you betray the trust being placed in you, the consequences will be severe beyond your ability to imagine." "I understand," Marcus repeated, though he was beginning to realize he understood very little about what he was getting into. The formal bonding ceremony would take place in 3 days, giving time for the proper preparations and announcements. In the meantime, Marcus found himself assigned quarters in Captain Starweaver's family estate, a sprawling complex of living buildings that had grown over centuries. "Are you completely insane?" he asked her once they were alone in the garden courtyard of her family's ancestral home. "Probably," she replied with that same radiant smile. "But it was the only way to guarantee your acceptance by the court. And, Marcus, I want you to know that I did not propose this lightly." "What do you mean?" She gestured for him to sit beside her on a bench that had grown from the living root system of the garden. Above them, luminescent flowers provided gentle illumination in the gathering dusk. "Velithra marriage bonds are not political contracts," she explained. "They are based on genuine affection and compatibility. Our psychologists have studied the recordings of our interactions, and They believe we have strong potential for a successful union. Marcus stared at her in amazement. You had psychologists analyze our compatibility? It is traditional when considering any significant relationship. The analysis showed high emotional and intellectual compatibility, with minimal risk of long-term conflict. She paused, looking suddenly uncertain. Unless you find the idea objectionable? The question was asked with a vulnerability that was completely at odds with the confident military leader he had come to know. Marcus realized that despite her noble birth and high rank, Captain Starweaver was as uncertain about this as he was. No, he said quietly. Not objectionable at all. The relief in her eyes was unmistakable. Good, because there are things you should know about what we're facing. The hegemony threat is worse than the public reports indicate. Over the next hour, she briefed him on classified intelligence that painted a grim picture. The hegemony wasn't just building up for a standard territorial war. They were preparing for conquest on a scale not seen for centuries. They had developed new weapons, formed alliances with pirate fleets, and were apparently planning to crush the consortium entirely. They believe they have found a decisive advantage, Captain Starweaver explained. Our intelligence suggests they have made contact with something or someone that has given them confidence in victory. Marcus felt a chill of premonition. When did this confidence first appear? Approximately 6 months ago, shortly before your ship was detected entering our region. The timing was too close to be coincidental. Somehow, humanity's arrival in this region had triggered the hegemony's aggression. But how could they know about Earth when the consortium had only just learned of humanity's existence? We need more information, Marcus said. And we need to prepare for the possibility that my people and yours are both in more danger than we realized. Captain Starweaver nodded grimly. The marriage bond will help, but it's only the first step. If we're going to survive what's coming, we'll need to forge a true alliance between our peoples. Can it be done? I don't know, she admitted. But I know that together, we have a better chance than apart. As Marcus looked up at the alien stars above this alien world, he wondered what his fellow humans would think when they learned he had married into an interstellar nobility to forge an alliance against an enemy they had never heard of. It wasn't exactly what the mission planners had envisioned when they sent him to explore the galaxy. But as Captain Starweaver's hand found his in the luminescent garden, Marcus realized he might have found something more valuable than the resources or new worlds humanity desperately needed. He might have found hope. The marriage ceremony between Marcus Chun and Captain Lyrian Starweaver was unlike anything that had ever taken place in the consortium's history. Representatives from across known space gathered in the grand amphitheater of Luminous, a natural formation that the planet had shaped specifically for this occasion. Marcus stood at the center of the amphitheater wearing ceremonial robes that seemed to shift and flow like liquid starlight. Beside him, Captain Starweaver was radiant in traditional Velethran wedding attire that incorporated living crystal formations and holographic projections of her family's history. The ceremony itself was a blend of ancient Velethran traditions and newly created elements to accommodate human customs. This union represents more than the joining of two individuals, Chancellor Vorth announced to the assembled crowd. It symbolizes the beginning of a new age for the consortium, one in which we welcome new allies and new possibilities. The actual bonding process involved a complex ritual where both participants shared memories, emotions, and commitments through a combination of Velethran psychic techniques and advanced technology. Marcus found himself experiencing Lyrian's childhood on the crystal spires of Vale the Prime, her academy training, her first command. In return, she witnessed his memories of Earth's blue skies, the launch of the UES Endeavor, his desperate escape from his dying ship. When the ceremony concluded, they were bound by laws that predated most civilizations in the galaxy. But more than that, they were connected by shared experiences and mutual understanding that ran deeper than either had expected. So, Lyrian said quietly as they stood together before the cheering crowd, "How does it feel to be married to an alien?" "Ask me again in a few centuries," Marcus replied, drawing laughter from his new wife. "Though I have to say, the benefits package is impressive." The celebration continued for 3 days, but urgent business could not be postponed forever. On the morning of the 4th day, Marcus found himself in a secure briefing room deep within the High Court complex, surrounded by the consortium's senior military leaders and intelligence analysts. Admiral Kess activated a holographic display showing the border region between Consortium and Hegemony space. Red indicators marked Hegemony fleet positions, while blue showed Consortium forces. The picture was not encouraging. The situation has deteriorated rapidly, Admiral Kess explained. The Hegemony has massed over 300 ships along the border, including at least 25 heavy dreadnoughts. We estimate they outnumber us 3-1 in this sector. What about reinforcements from the inner systems? Asked General Thorne, the Consortium's chief of staff. En route, but they won't arrive for at least 2 weeks. The Hegemony appears to be moving to a timetable that ensures they'll strike before our reinforcements can arrive. Marcus studied the tactical display with growing concern. The Hegemony's positioning showed sophisticated strategic thinking. They had concentrated their forces at key choke points that would allow them to cut off Consortium supply lines while protecting their own rear areas. Have we identified their primary objectives? He asked. Lyrian activated another display showing the Consortium's core systems. Intelligence suggests they're planning a 3-pronged assault. The first wave will target our industrial worlds to cripple our ability to replace losses. The second wave will strike our agricultural systems to create refugee crises and strain our resources. The final assault will be aimed at Luminous itself. Classic strategy, Marcus observed. Weaken the enemy's ability to fight, create internal chaos, then deliver the killing blow to the command structure. You speak as if you have military experience, Admiral Kess noted. Marcus nodded. Earth has a long history of warfare. We've seen this pattern many times. He didn't mention that humanity was still using these same strategies against itself when he left. The Consortium's leaders didn't need to know about Earth's internal conflicts. What would humanity recommend as a response? General Thorne asked. The question surprised Marcus. He was a scientist and explorer, not a military strategist. But he had studied enough human military history to understand the principles involved. On Earth, we've learned that defensive strategies rarely work against a determined aggressor with superior numbers, he said carefully. The defender's advantage gets eroded over time as the attacker chooses when and where to engage. Eventually, the defender runs out of reserves. So you recommend offensive action? Admiral Kess sounded skeptical. I recommend disrupting the enemy's timeline. Force them to react to your movements instead of executing their plan unopposed. Marcus gestured to the tactical display. This deployment took months to organize. If you can force them to redeploy significant forces to meet unexpected threats, you might buy enough time for your reinforcements to arrive. The discussion continued for hours as the military leaders debated various options. Marcus found himself increasingly involved in the strategic planning, offering perspectives drawn from humanity's violent but instructive history. Finally, Admiral Kess made a decision. We'll implement a modified version of the human recommendations. Fast strike forces will hit hegemony supply lines and secondary targets to force them to disperse their concentrated forces. Meanwhile, our main fleet will pull back to defensive positions around critical systems. It's risky, General Thorne warned. If the strikes fail to achieve significant disruption, we'll be in an even worse position. All our options are risky now, Lyrian pointed out. At least this approach gives us the initiative. As the meeting broke up, Marcus found himself wondering how he had gone from rescued castaway to military advisor in the span of a few weeks. But there was no time for philosophical reflection. The first strike missions would launch within hours, and there was still much to prepare. The command center during the operation was a marvel of Consortium technology. Holographic displays showed real-time positions of ships across hundreds of star systems. Faster-than-light communication arrays allowed near-instantaneous coordination between forces separated by thousands of light years. Marcus watched as Consortium strike forces emerged from fold space near hegemony logistics bases. The attacks were precisely coordinated, hitting multiple targets simultaneously to maximize confusion and minimize the enemy's ability to respond. The first reports were encouraging. 3 major supply depots have been destroyed, and 2 hegemony fleet units have been caught out of position and badly mauled. But the hegemony's response was swift and professional. They're repositioning faster than anticipated, reported the tactical officer monitoring the operation. Defensive squadrons are moving to protect remaining supply lines. Expected, Admiral Kess replied calmly. Phase 2, initiate. The second wave of strikes targeted hegemony communication nodes and sensor arrays. The goal was to blind the enemy command structure and force them to operate with incomplete information. Marcus watched the tactical display with fascination and growing dread. The strike operations were succeeding tactically, but the strategic picture was becoming clearer. The hegemony had prepared for exactly this type of disruption. Their response showed planning and coordination that suggested they had been gaming out various consortium responses for months. "Admiral," he said quietly, "I think we're dealing with more than just superior preparation. Their responses are too good. They're anticipating our moves." Lyrian, who had been monitoring communications from the front lines, looked up with concern. "What are you suggesting? Either they have intelligence assets we don't know about, or they're getting advice from someone who understands consortium tactics very well." The implication hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The possibility of high-level infiltration or betrayal was every military leader's nightmare. Admiral Kess called for a security review of all personnel involved in operational planning. Meanwhile, the strikes continued, but with less success. The hegemony seemed to anticipate every move, positioning forces to minimize damage and maximize consortium losses. By the end of the first day, the strategic situation had actually worsened. The consortium strike forces had achieved some tactical victories, but at a higher cost than anticipated. Worse, the hegemony's main fleet was accelerating its preparations for the primary assault. "We need a new approach," General Thorne admitted grimly. "The conventional strategies aren't working." Marcus had been studying the pattern of hegemony responses, looking for anything that might reveal the source of their intelligence advantage. What he found was disturbing. "Look at this," he said, highlighting data patterns on the tactical display. "Every time we've modified our plans based on real-time intelligence, the hegemony has countered within hours. But when we've acted on pre-planned operations, they've been slower to respond." "Meaning?" Admiral Kess asked. "Meaning their intelligence source might be real-time. They're not working from stolen plans or infiltrated briefings. They're getting information as we make decisions." The possibility sent a chill through the command center. Real-time intelligence could only come from a few sources: advanced sensor systems, psychic surveillance, or direct access to consortium communication networks. "Run a security scan of all communication channels," Admiral Kess ordered, "and initiate psychic screening protocols for all senior staff." While the security teams worked, Marcus found himself alone with Lyrian in a shielded briefing room. The stress of the past day was showing on her face, and he could see the weight of responsibility she carried. "How do your people handle betrayal?" she asked quietly. "Badly, usually," Marcus admitted. "We have a long history of people selling out their own kind for personal gain. But we've also learned that assuming betrayal without proof can be just as destructive as the betrayal itself." "Wise words," she said, though her expression remained troubled. "There's something else you should know. The High Court is beginning to question the marriage alliance. Some members think the timing of your arrival and the hegemony's aggression is too convenient to be coincidental." Marcus felt his heart sink. "They think I'm a spy." "Not exactly. But they're wondering if your presence somehow triggered the hegemony's actions. If making contact with humanity was the catalyst for this war." The possibility had occurred to Marcus as well, but hearing it stated openly made it more real and more frightening. If the consortium decided that humanity was the cause of their current crisis, the consequences for both their peoples could be catastrophic. "What do you think?" he asked. Lyrian was quiet for a long moment, her violet eyes reflecting the soft glow of the room's bioluminescent panels. "I think that if the hegemony has been planning this for months, they would have acted regardless of your arrival. Your presence might have affected their timing, but not their ultimate intentions." "But you're not certain?" "No," she admitted. "I'm not certain of anything anymore." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the command center. The security scans had revealed something that changed everything. The consortium's quantum communication network, the most secure system in known space, had been compromised. Not by conventional infiltration or hacking, but by something far more sophisticated. Someone had found a way to tap into the quantum entanglement itself, allowing them to intercept communications in real time without any detectable trace. The technology required was beyond anything the hegemony possessed. It was beyond anything the consortium possessed, which meant they were dealing with a third party, someone with capabilities that exceeded even the most advanced civilizations in known space. As Marcus and Lyrian hurried back to the command center, one terrifying possibility began to emerge. What if the hegemony hadn't developed this technology themselves? What if they had made contact with something else entirely? Something that saw the arrival of humanity as a threat to be eliminated? The war that was about to begin might not be between the consortium and the hegemony after all. It might be between all known civilizations and something completely unknown. Something that had been watching and waiting for the right moment to make its move. And Marcus realized that his arrival, the marriage alliance, and the hegemony's aggression might all be part of a larger pattern that none of them had seen coming. The discovery of the quantum communication breach sent shockwaves through the consortium's leadership. In the secure depths of the High Court complex, emergency sessions ran continuously as military leaders and intelligence analysts tried to comprehend the implications. Marcus found himself at the center of increasingly intense discussions, not as a suspected spy, but as the only person present who might understand the mindset of a species encountering advanced galactic civilizations for the first time. The working theory was that the hegemony had made contact with an unknown force that viewed humanity's arrival as a threat to their own plans. The timing supports this hypothesis, explained Dr. Zura Velen, the consortium's chief xenopsychologist. The hegemony's behavioral patterns shifted dramatically approximately 6 months ago, precisely when your ship would have been detected entering this region of space. Admiral Kess studied the intelligence reports spread across the holographic displays. The quantum tap represents technology beyond anything we've seen from the hegemony. Their science is advanced, but follows predictable patterns. This is something entirely different. Show me their recent tactical innovations, Marcus requested. The displays shifted to show battle recordings from recent skirmishes. Marcus watched as hegemony forces employed new strategies that seemed to anticipate consortium countermeasures perfectly. But there was something else, something in the way their ships moved and coordinated that felt familiar. These formation patterns, he said slowly, highlighting specific movements. They're not typical hegemony doctrine. They're similar to something else. What? Lyrian asked, leaning forward intently. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, accessing memories he wished he didn't have. Human naval tactics. Specifically, patterns developed during our most recent global conflict. Someone has been studying our military history. The implications were staggering. Not only had the unknown force made contact with the hegemony, they had somehow gained access to detailed information about human military capabilities and strategies. How was that possible? Dr. Velen asked. Your ship's computer systems were heavily damaged when we found you. The computer, yes, Marcus agreed grimly. But not everything was stored in the computer. We carried physical archives, redundant data storage, cultural records. Everything Earth wanted to share with any civilizations we encountered, including, he realized with growing dread, detailed military histories meant to demonstrate humanity's evolution from a warlike species to a peaceful one. Information that could easily be reverse-engineered to understand human tactical thinking. We need to consider the possibility that the unknown force has not just contacted the hegemony, General Thorne said. They might have contacted Earth as well. The thought hit Marcus like a physical blow. Earth was defenseless against any force capable of the quantum surveillance they had detected. If these unknowns had approached humanity with offers of technology or alliance, desperate Earth governments might have accepted without understanding the true cost. I need to contact my homeworld, he said urgently. If they've been compromised, we need to know immediately. Admiral Kess shook her head. Impossible. Any communication with Earth would reveal its location to whoever is monitoring our networks. We cannot risk exposing an entire world to protect it. The irony was bitter. To save Earth, they had to abandon it, at least temporarily. But Marcus was beginning to understand that the threat was larger than any single world or civilization. This isn't about Earth or the consortium or even the hegemony, he said, pieces of the larger puzzle falling into place. This is about control of this entire region of space. The unknowns aren't trying to prevent an alliance between humanity and the consortium. They're trying to eliminate any civilizations that might threaten their expansion plans. Dr. Velen nodded slowly. A classic pattern in xenopsychology. When an advanced species decides to expand into occupied space, They often manipulate existing conflicts to weaken potential resistance before revealing themselves. But they made one mistake. Marcus continued, his mind racing. They base their understanding of human tactics on our historical records. They don't know how we've adapted those tactics for space warfare, because we haven't fought any space wars yet. Lyrian caught his meaning immediately. You think we can use their incomplete knowledge against them? Maybe. But first, we need to identify who they are and where they're operating from. The next several hours were spent analyzing every piece of available intelligence. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source: the salvage records from Marcus's rescue. Hidden in the background data was a pattern that had been overlooked in the initial analysis. "Look at this," Marcus said, highlighting subtle variations in the quantum field readings from his escape pod. "These fluctuations aren't random. They're echo patterns from something scanning my ship before it was destroyed." The mathematics were complex, but the implications were clear. Something had been observing the UES Endeavor from the moment it entered this region of space. The destruction of his ship hadn't been an accident or result of mechanical failure. It had been deliberate. "They wanted you to survive," Dr. Velen observed. "But they wanted your ship destroyed, so we would have incomplete information about human capabilities." "A chess move," Admiral Kess said grimly. "Position a piece where your opponent will find it, but ensure that piece serves your strategy rather than theirs." Marcus felt a chill of understanding. They didn't just want to study human tactics. They wanted to see how the consortium would react to contact with a new species. "We've been laboratory subjects from the beginning." The realization transformed their understanding of the entire situation. The marriage alliance, the military cooperation, the strategic planning, all of it had been observed and analyzed by an intelligence that viewed entire civilizations as test subjects. "So what do we do now?" Lyrian asked. "How do we fight an enemy that's been manipulating us from the beginning?" Marcus studied the tactical displays, his mind working through possibilities and consequences. "We give them something they don't expect. We stop playing by their rules." Over the next 2 days, a desperate plan took shape. The consortium would appear to follow the strategy the unknowns expected, a defensive posture designed to buy time while reinforcements arrived. But hidden within that strategy would be something unprecedented in galactic warfare, a direct assault on the unknowns themselves. The key was the quantum communication breach. If the unknowns were tapping into the consortium's networks, they had to be doing it from somewhere nearby. The quantum entanglement effect had limited range even with the most advanced technology. Marcus worked with consortium scientists to develop a way to trace the quantum intrusion back to its source. It was incredibly dangerous work, requiring them to deliberately expose sensitive communications while running sophisticated detection algorithms. "If they detect what we're doing, they'll know we've identified the breach," warned Dr. Kess, the lead quantum physicist on the project. "That's a risk we have to take," Marcus replied. "We can't fight effectively while they're watching our every move." The trace operation was scheduled to coincide with a major consortium fleet movement, providing cover for the increased network activity. As Admiral Kess repositioned forces to defend critical systems, Marcus and the quantum team worked frantically to lock onto the source of the intrusion. The results were shocking. The quantum tap wasn't coming from hegemony space at all. It was originating from a seemingly empty region between the two powers' territories, an area that had been surveyed repeatedly and shown no signs of habitation or technology. "Cloaking technology," General Thorne observed as they studied the readings. "But on a scale we've never seen before. They've hidden an entire installation in plain sight." "Not just an installation," Marcus corrected, studying the quantum signatures. "Those readings suggest something the size of a small moon. They've been watching and manipulating this entire region from a hidden base that's been there for years, maybe decades." The discovery changed everything. The unknown force wasn't a recent arrival responding to humanity's appearance. They were a long-term presence that had been preparing for expansion long before Marcus arrived in their region. "New plan," Admiral Kess announced. "We're going to hit their base directly." "With what?" General Thorne asked skeptically. "We don't even know what kind of defenses they have." Marcus had been thinking about exactly that problem. "We use the one advantage we have. They think they understand us, but they don't. They've been studying consortium tactics for years, and they think they know human tactics from historical records. But they've never seen the two combined." The assault plan that emerged was unlike anything in consortium military doctrine. Instead of the careful, methodical approach that had characterized their warfare for centuries, They would use human-style rapid deployment and overwhelming force concentration. Three-strike fleets would approach the hidden base from different vectors, using human navigational techniques that relied on gravitational slingshots rather than direct fold-space jumps. The approach would be slower, but much harder to detect. Meanwhile, the main consortium fleet would continue its apparent defensive preparations, maintaining the illusion that they were unaware of the hidden base. This could backfire catastrophically, Admiral Kess warned during the final planning session. If we fail to neutralize the base, we'll have revealed our knowledge while accomplishing nothing. And if we do nothing, they'll continue manipulating the situation until both the consortium and the hegemony are destroyed, Marcus countered. Sometimes the only way forward is through. Lyrian placed her hand over his as they studied the final assault plans. Whatever happens, we face it together. Marcus nodded, though he was acutely aware that they were about to gamble the fate of multiple civilizations on a strategy developed by combining technologies and tactical doctrines that had never been tested together. In 12 hours, they would either strike a decisive blow against an ancient enemy, or they would trigger a war that could consume the entire galaxy. As the strike fleets prepared to launch, Marcus found himself thinking about the irony of his situation. He had left Earth as an explorer seeking peaceful contact with alien civilizations. Instead, he had become a military strategist planning an assault against an unknown enemy that threatened everything he cared about. But perhaps that was what exploration really meant, not just discovering new worlds and new peoples, but being willing to fight for the right of those peoples to exist free from the manipulation of hidden powers that viewed entire species as expendable resources. The countdown to the assault had begun, and there was no turning back now. The assault on the hidden base began at precisely 1400 hours Consortium Standard Time. Though to outside observers, it would appear that nothing unusual was happening at all. The three-strike fleets had spent 6 days moving into position using human-style ballistic trajectories that avoided the telltale energy signatures of fold-space travel. Marcus stood in the command center aboard the flagship Sin-S Eternal Dawn, watching as Admiral Kess coordinated the most complex military operation in Consortium history. Around him, displays showed the positions of hundreds of ships across dozens of star systems, all moving in carefully choreographed patterns designed to mask their true intentions. Strike Fleet Alpha has reached the outer perimeter, reported Captain Vorth from the communication station. No sign of detection. The hidden base was protected by layers of sophisticated cloaking technology, but the consortium had learned much in the days since discovering its existence. By studying the quantum signatures, Dr. Kess had identified subtle gravitational anomalies that revealed the base's true structure, a massive installation built into a captured asteroid that had been moved to this location decades ago. Fleet Beta in position, came the next report, ready to commence final approach. Lyrian moved to stand beside Marcus at the tactical display. As his wife and the operation's second-in-command, she had the responsibility of coordinating the ground assault once the base's defenses were breached. Nervous? She asked quietly. Terrified, Marcus admitted. We're about to attack an enemy we've never seen using tactics we've never tested. If I were in command of that base, I'd have at least 3 contingency plans for exactly this scenario. Good thing you're on our side then, Lyrian replied with a smile that didn't quite hide her own anxiety. The plan was audaciously simple in concept, but incredibly complex in execution. The 3-strike fleets would attack simultaneously from different angles, overwhelming the base's ability to respond to multiple threats. Meanwhile, specialized assault teams would breach the base's hull and secure critical systems before the defenders could destroy vital intelligence. But the unknown enemy had proven themselves masters of manipulation and strategic thinking. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a carefully prepared trap. All fleets report ready, Admiral Kess announced. Commence Operation Starfall. The attack began with a coordinated barrage from long-range weapons that had been modified with human targeting algorithms. Instead of the precise, measured strikes favored by consortium doctrine, the assault used saturation fire designed to overwhelm defensive systems through sheer volume. The results were immediate and spectacular. The hidden base's cloaking field collapsed under the bombardment, revealing a structure that defied easy categorization. Part space station, part fortress, part organic growth. It was clearly the product of a technology that operated on principles entirely different from anything in consortium experience. Unknown defensive systems activating, reported the sensor operator. Energy readings are off the scale. The base's response was unlike anything in consortium tactical databases. Instead of conventional weapons, it deployed what appeared to be living constructs, creatures of energy and matter that move through space like predators hunting prey. They ignored the incoming fire and instead targeted the attacking ships directly. Evasive maneuvers. Admiral Kess ordered. Deploy countermeasures. The battle that followed was chaos in 3 dimensions. The energy constructs were incredibly fast and seemingly intelligent, adapting their attack patterns to counter every defensive measure the consortium forces tried. Ships that had never suffered damage in decades of service found themselves fighting for survival against enemies that seemed to exist only partially in normal space. But the human-inspired tactics proved effective in ways the enemy hadn't anticipated. Instead of the careful formation flying that characterized consortium warfare, the strike fleets used human-style fighter tactics, rapid course changes, unpredictable attack vectors, and coordinated strikes that concentrated overwhelming firepower on single targets. The constructs are struggling to adapt, observed Dr. Velen from the science station. Their response patterns suggest they were programmed to counter consortium tactical doctrine, not this hybrid approach. Marcus watched as Strike Fleet Gamma broke through the base's outer defenses and began targeting what appeared to be key structural points. The base was fighting back fiercely, but its responses seemed almost confused, as if it couldn't quite understand what it was facing. Boarding teams, prepare for assault, Lyrian announced. Target the central hub. Intelligence suggests that's where their command systems are located. The boarding operation was the most dangerous part of the plan. Specialized assault shuttles, protected by experimental shields that combined consortium and human technology, raced toward the base's surface while the larger battle raged around them. Marcus had wanted to join the boarding teams, but Admiral Kess had refused. "You're too valuable as a strategic advisor," she had explained. "And your wife would never forgive me if I let you get killed in the first week of your marriage." The shuttles reached the base's surface and began cutting through the hull with plasma torches. The defenders responded by flooding the area with hostile organisms that seemed designed to repel boarders, but the assault teams were prepared for biological defenses. "Breach successful," reported Major Kane, commander of the boarding operation. "We're inside the primary structure. This place is strange." The images transmitted from the boarding teams showed corridors that seemed to grow rather than be built, walls that pulsed with organic rhythms, and technology that incorporated living components. It was clearly not the work of any known species. The aesthetic suggests a civilization that never made the distinction between biology and technology, Dr. Velen observed. They appear to have developed along completely different lines from any species in our databases. The boarding teams fought their way deeper into the base, encountering defenders that were even stranger than the structure itself. Part machine, part organism, they moved and fought within human coordination, but seemed vulnerable to the unpredictable human-style tactics the teams employed. "Central Command located," Major Kane reported. "We're seeing something incredible here. This isn't just a monitoring station. It's a control center for operations spanning dozens of star systems." The intelligence haul was staggering. The unknown enemy had been manipulating galactic politics for over a century, nudging civilizations toward conflicts that served their expansion plans. They had agents in place throughout known space, including high-ranking positions in both the consortium and the hegemony. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. "Marcus," Lyrian called from the communication station, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "You need to see this." The display showed a star chart that included Earth's location and detailed information about human civilization. But it also showed something else. The route that Marcus's ship had taken to reach consortium space, complete with planned waypoints and mission objectives. "They knew you were coming," Admiral Kess said grimly. "They've been monitoring Earth for years." The evidence was overwhelming. The unknown enemy had been tracking human space exploration since its earliest stages, studying Earth's development and waiting for the right moment to act. Marcus's mission hadn't been a random encounter. It had been anticipated and manipulated from the beginning. "The good news is that Earth hasn't been compromised," Dr. Velen reported as more intelligence flowed in from the boarding teams. "The enemy considered humanity too primitive to be worth direct contact. They were planning to eliminate Earth after dealing with the major galactic powers. And the bad news? The bad news is that this base is just one part of a much larger network. There are installations like this throughout the galaxy, each one controlling operations in its region. We've won a tactical victory, but the strategic threat remains. The base's defenders were making a final desperate stand in the central command chamber, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The hybrid tactics had proven too effective, and the enemy's carefully laid plans were unraveling. As the last defenders fell, and the command systems came under consortium control, Marcus felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. They had succeeded beyond their wildest hopes, but they had also discovered that the threat was far larger than anyone had imagined. Signal from Major Kane, Lyrian announced. The base is secure. They're downloading everything they can before the self-destruct systems activate. The base was indeed programmed to destroy itself rather than fall into enemy hands, but the boarding teams had disabled the most critical systems. Much of the installation would be lost, but the intelligence treasure trove would survive. As the evacuation proceeded and the base began its death throes, Marcus found himself thinking about the future. The immediate threat had been neutralized, but the war was far from over. The enemy network was vast and sophisticated, with plans that spanned centuries and contingencies for every imaginable scenario. But they had also proven that the enemy was not invincible. Their greatest strength, their manipulation of existing galactic politics, was also their greatest weakness. They had spent so long studying and predicting the behavior of known civilizations that they were vulnerable to genuinely new approaches. What happens now? Lyrian asked as they watched the base's final destruction on the tactical display. Now we take the fight to them, Marcus replied. We've learned their methods, identified their weaknesses, and proven that they can be defeated. But most importantly, we've shown that the alliance between humanity and the consortium isn't just possible. It's the key to victory. Admiral Kess nodded approval. The High Court will need to be briefed immediately. This intelligence will reshape our understanding of galactic politics. Every alliance, every conflict, every major political development will need to be re-examined in light of what we've learned. The journey back to Luminous took 3 days, during which teams of analysts worked around the clock to process the intelligence haul from the base. The picture that emerged was both horrifying and hopeful. The enemy network was indeed vast, with installations in dozens of star systems and agents placed throughout galactic society. They had been working for centuries to weaken potential opposition and position themselves for a final conquest that would give them control of the entire galaxy. But the network was also vulnerable. It depended on careful coordination and long-term planning that assumed predictable behavior from their targets. The success of the hybrid human consortium tactics had disrupted their models and forced them to reassess their entire strategy. When they arrived at Luminous, Marcus and Lyrian found themselves at the center of a political whirlwind. The High Court had convened an emergency session, and representatives from across the consortium were demanding answers about the threat that had been lurking in their midst for decades. The revelation that the Marriage Alliance had been instrumental in uncovering and defeating the hidden enemy transformed Marcus from a curiosity into a hero. But he was acutely aware that the real heroes were the crews who had risked everything in the assault on the base. The question now, Chancellor Vorth announced to the assembled court, is how we proceed. We have identified a threat that spans the galaxy, but we have also proven that it can be defeated. The alliance between humanity and the consortium has already borne fruit beyond our wildest expectations. Marcus stood to address the court, feeling the weight of history on his shoulders. Honored Chancellor, esteemed representatives, I believe the path forward is clear. We must expand the alliance beyond just humanity and the consortium. Every free civilization in the galaxy has a stake in defeating this enemy network. We must unite them all. The proposal was ambitious to the point of seeming impossible. The galaxy contained hundreds of independent civilizations, many of them traditional enemies. Forging a coalition that included everyone from the militant hegemony to the pacifist harmony collective would require diplomatic skills that had never been tested on such a scale. The realization that they had more in common with their supposed enemies than they had with their hidden puppet masters was powerful motivation for unity. "The human speaks wisdom," declared Ambassador Rex, the former hegemony warrior who had defected to the consortium decades ago. "I have contacts within the hegemony leadership. This intelligence will shake them to their cores. They pride themselves on their independence and strength, but this proves they have been dancing to alien strings for generations." Over the following weeks, diplomatic missions were dispatched to every major power in the galaxy. The evidence from the hidden base was overwhelming, and the response was everything Marcus had hoped for. One by one, traditional enemies agreed to set aside their conflicts to face the common threat. The hegemony was among the first to join the alliance, their pride stung by the revelation that their recent aggression had been manipulated by outside forces. The warrior culture that had made them feared throughout the galaxy also made them ideal allies once their true enemy was identified. The alliance that formed became known as the Galactic Liberation Coalition, and its first major operation was a coordinated assault on the enemy network's remaining installations. Using the intelligence gathered from the hidden base and tactics developed through the partnership between human and consortium military doctrine, the coalition achieved victory after victory. But the final confrontation was yet to come. The enemy's main stronghold lay beyond the galaxy's edge, in a region of space that had never been explored by any known civilization. The assault on that stronghold would require everything the coalition had learned about working together. As Marcus stood on the bridge of the flagship that would lead humanity's contribution to the final battle, he reflected on the strange path that had brought him here. He had left Earth as a lone explorer, seeking peaceful contact with alien civilizations. He was returning to known space as the husband of an alien princess and the co-architect of the largest military alliance in galactic history. But, most importantly, he was returning with hope. Humanity would not face the darkness alone, and neither would any of the other free peoples of the galaxy. They had learned that their diversity was their strength, and that by working together, they could overcome any threat. The final battle was still ahead, but Marcus was confident in its outcome. The galaxy had awakened to the threat in its midst, and the alliance they had forged would ensure that all free civilizations could face the future together as equals among the stars.